Welcome to our community church, Unitarian Universalist. I am your worship associate, Alicia, and it is a joy to be with you today. So who are we as Community Church? We are a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual search for truth and meaning. Ours is a faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being. We like to begin our service with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge and pay tribute to the original inhabitants of this land. The city of New Orleans is a continuation of an indigenous trade hub on the Mississippi River, known for thousands of years as Bulbancha. Tribes that have lived on this land include the Caddo, the Natchez, the Choctaw, Chitimacha, Homa, Tunica, Biloxi, Arakapa Ishak, and others. We recognize that as a result of broken treaties and involuntary removals, Native Americans were often forced from their lands. We remember and pay respect to the communities impacted by these actions. Native people have lived on this land since time immemorial, and the resilient voices of Native Americans remain an inseparable part of our local culture. With gratitude and honor, we acknowledge the indigenous nations that have lived and continue to thrive here. We have a few announcements this morning. Some have gone out in your email. I'll bring up Laura to talk about the Avis Memorial.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's so great to be back here and see you all. I'm really excited about that. Right after the service today, we're going to have what will hopefully be a very brief meeting, because I know we're going to be anxious to get to the delicious lunch that's waiting for us. But the vote for the sanctuary signage designated the sanctuary as the Avis Sanctuary, and also a plaque out by the door of the crying room with a brief reason for why we have made the decision to name the sanctuary after her, and a picture. Those are the things that we are going to be doing. Now, what we're voting on is whether we want the signage to be in metal or in wood. And you all should have received an email from Valentine with some illustrations showing the basic styles of these. The voting will be open starting at 12:15 and running until almost midnight on Tuesday. I think it's closing at 11:59 on Tuesday night. So then we'll know what we're going to be doing. And honestly, the purpose of the meeting after the service is really just to answer any questions that anybody might have that are not readily obvious from looking at the email that Valentine sent out. So, thank you all.
Now we'll bring up Sean to give an update from our stewardship committee.
Hi, everybody. Hi. Is my volume okay? Is Darren? Good. Okay, so there was a long lead up to it. Today's the big day, finally, day one of the church's annual pledge drive. This is the main budget drive we conduct every year to keep the church operating. There is a catered lunch after our worship service and after the brief discussion and vote to talk about the sanctuary sign. So everybody here is welcome to attend that. There's no special status required to be able to attend. And I'll mention quickly, it's been generously subsidized by Mary Ann, who's busy getting things ready. She's paid for the catering. And Marilyn Malone and Alan have graciously paid for the wine and the decorations, and have given a lot of their time to set this up. So grateful for that. Also, in advance of the pledge drive launch every year, it's a tradition for us to ask the members of the board and the stewardship committee to pledge in advance. And I'm happy to say that our advance pledges as of today are $28,440. And finally, I'll say a few words about why I support the church. I support CCUU for many reasons. To me, CCUU means community, friendship, spiritual strength, and for a brainy guy like me, intellectual stimulation. CCUU also gives me an opportunity to partner with others on things that matter to me and that in many cases are bigger than me. And I feel as if my participation in the life of the church enables others to do the same. That's all. Thank you.
Just a quick announcement from me. The drag brunch is coming up. A few of us are going to be in the Bywater neighborhood at the country club for a long-standing drag brunch tradition that special place offers. So let me know if you're interested. My opening words to you today come from activist Lila Watson. She says, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together."
Let us now prepare for worship with our chalice lighting. It is Community Church's custom to light a chalice, invoking hope and eternal truth to our worship. Please join in singing "We Light This Flame" with the words printed in your order of service. For our words for all ages.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm going to share with you this morning the story of Otis by Lauren Long. There was once a friendly little tractor. His name was Otis. And every day, Otis and his farmer worked together, taking care of the farm they called home. Otis liked to work. After working hard all day, Otis was ready to unwind and play. He would ride the rolling hills and skirt the mud pond down by the corn. He leapfrogged bales of hay and explored through the haystacks. On occasion, he would chase the rabbit or play ring around the rosies with the ducks to the sound of his steady puff, puttity chuff. And times at the end of the day, he would just sit under the apple tree and watch the farm below. Every night, tired but happy, Otis would puff into the small stall in the barn that was all his. One night, when Otis was fast asleep, the farmer brought a beautiful baby calf into the barn. The calf bawled and bawled for her mother, but when the sleepy sound of the soft putt, puff, puttity chuff came from the next stall, The scared little calf stopped bawling and drifted off to sleep. From that day on, the calf started following the little tractor wherever he went. Put, puff, puttity, chuff. She followed him over the rolling hills and down by the pond. She was right behind him, leapfrogging bales of hay. And the calf made the game of ring around the rosies all the better. Sometimes, at the end of the day, the two of them would just sit together under the apple tree and watch the farm below. Otis loved his little calf, and the little calf loved Otis. Then, one day, the farmer surprised everyone with a brand new yellow tractor. "Time to move out, Otis," the farmer said. He took Otis out of the little stall in the barn that was all his and parked him back behind the barn. Then he backed the big yellow tractor into the stall next to the little calf. But the little calf didn't like the big yellow tractor. He had a deep, rumbling snore that shook the stall until he slept. There was no one to purr the little calf gently to sleep, no one to spend her days with. And Otis could not even see his farm as the weeds began to cover his tires. His friend often sat with him, but she could not get him to play like the old days. It was early summer when the farmer discovered the poster. Who was the prettiest calf in town? Judges will decide at the country fair and award a fancy blue ribbon to the winner. The farmer knew the answer. He would show his little calf. But on the morning of the fair, the little calf was nowhere to be found. She had wandered down to the mud pond by the cornfield to cool off. When she waded into the muddy water, her feet sank. With every step, she sank deeper and deeper and deeper. The little calf was stuck in the mud pond. "Get the hands," the farmer shouted when he saw her. All the farm hands came running with ropes, but the more they tugged, the more stuck the calf got. "Get the big yellow tractor," the farmer shouted. "He can save her." But the big tractor just scared the little calf. She sank in deeper and deeper. Nearby farmers began to gather. Then call the fire chief Douglas and the fire truck, the farmer shouted. "They can save our little calf." But the sight of the big red fire truck startled the little calf even deeper. The farmer was fit to be tied. If the farm hands and the big tractor and even the fire chief Douglas and his fire truck couldn't save the little calf, who could, you ask? Otis puffed down the rolling hill and pulled right up next to them. I'm sorry, missed a page, sorry. Suddenly, the little calf's ears perked up. Over the hum of the growing crowd, there came a faint sound in the distance, a soft, rhythmic purr, puff, puttity chuff. The crowd turned and looked. The sound began louder, puff, puff, puttity chuff, and all at once, Otis puffed from around the barn. He turned and headed straight toward the mud pond. Otis puffed down the rolling hill and pulled right up next to the muddy water's edge. The calf heard her friend's puttering purr and bawl. It was something like a hello. Then, to the sound of his gentle chuff and the amazement of all the people in the crowd, Otis suddenly began to circle the pond. He circled, and the little calf turned and turned, never taking her eyes off of her friend. With each ring, so exciting. With each ring Otis made around the pond, the muddy grip loosened until the calf was able to stumble out of the pond on her own. The two friends had found each other again. Otis led the calf right down the dusty road toward the village, and everybody threw flowers as they went, following them into town. It looked like a happy parade. No one needed a fancy blue ribbon to tell them that the calf was a special calf. Otis was a special tractor, and the two of them were special friends. From that day on, the farmer discovered that with Otis's puttering purr beside the chicken coop, his chickens laid more eggs. At milking time, with Otis' gentle chuff nearby, his cows produced more milk. On occasion, Otis even got to join the farmer in the big yellow truck out in the fields. But often, at the end of the day, Otis would just sit with his friend under the apple tree and watch the farm below. The end. We can say that. Yeah, I gotta clap. We can sing the children wherever they are. Thanks.
So now is our sacred time of joys and sorrows. If you have a need to share with this community, whether it be expressing something that weighs heavy on your heart these days, or letting us know what reason there is to celebrate, you can either write your comment on one of the comment cards from the lobby, you could come up to the microphone after a musical interlude, or you can use the chat box if you're watching us online. We are going to be singing hymn 292, If I Can Stop One Heart from Breaking. Were there any cards to be collected? And I don't know if you Is there anyone else that has a joy or a sorrow, Jim?
Yes, some of you saw in the paper today that Louisiana is perhaps the most vulnerable in terms of climate change. And so it's just a sorrow that we're in that condition, but also it motivates me and hopefully others to do what we can to address global climate change.
It was your birthday last week, right? Or is it today? Yeah.
10. Mine was the 10.
Yeah, okay.
Last week.
Last week.
Is there anyone else, Laura?
I hadn't planned on coming up here, but Jim reminds me, some of y'all might like to know, excuse me, this afternoon from 2 to 4 in Washington Square, they are holding a jazz funeral for fossil fuels. And I'm planning on going. Some friends, I know some people have organized that I know are environmentally concerned. So just thought I'd share that information.
Is there anyone else? In that case, we will light 2 more candles. One for the joys left unsaid, perhaps still waiting to be shared. And one for the sorrows left unsaid, perhaps that we cannot yet put words to. Know that we love you, and that we're holding you in our hearts.
Community Church is a self-sustaining congregation. Members and friends' generosity help us to do our sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community, as well as beyond. You can give online at ccuunola.org/stewardship or by text at 504-370-2659. You can text the word give. You can also, of course, pledge and give generously here in person. And you can raise your hand and someone will pass a plate if you are so inclined. So we give 50% towards a nonprofit or group that our social justice ministry committee cares about. And for the month of September, we are doing that for the Humane Society. And the Humane Society does wonderful work to bring awareness to the issues that our beloved pet population and animal world suffer in, and to help bring joy and connection to the human world. So thank you for your generosity. And we will now be singing hymn number 184, Be Ye Lamps Unto Yourselves, and you can remain seated.
Be
have two readings for you this morning. One is a little longer one, and then the second one's a little shorter. The first reading I have for you is an excerpt and adapted from an interview with Emergence magazine by eco-philosopher and spiritual philosopher Joanna Macy. In this reading, in this interview actually, Joanna reflects on her time as an anti-nuclear war activist and the seeds in the community that brought about this reflection. And in this reflection, she brings up grief and the reflection of the state that her group of fellow activists were engaged in. And in this reflection, during the Cold War and the Reagan years, she talks about how they reframe. And talking about really reflecting on how grief and despair engage in the work that she was doing at the time. And then she says, I noticed they began talking as if they had a shift in identity from being a separate individual to being the earth. You could feel it, that they had an expansion of sense of their own autonomy and personal relevance. And so I thought, well, this certainly demonstrates Padaka Sampada, which was the Buddhist term for our interdependence, our interexistence, our interbeing. And then I heard the term deep ecology and the term ecological self. That when we mature, a natural maturation of the human is towards widening fields of relevance and caring, and that your self-interest expands from being just what affects you inside your bag of skin to what expands to your family or tribe or country, and then what happens to Earth. Also, not only the ecological self, but in Buddhism there's the term bodhisattva, as the individual with a boundless heart who won't even step into and take rest in nirvana until every blade of grass is enlightened. So all beings are freed from suffering. Circumstantially, in our planetary journey, things are a lot scarier and a lot more destructive now. By people acting as if they were more than their separate self, but not in any kind of controlling, self-wanting way, but humbly, it gives me a sense that I have a lot of grief for what we're doing to our world and to our future. But I know that at the same time, whatever happens, there's nothing that can happen that will separate me from the living body of our earth. Nothing. It's who we are, and that is so vast. My mind is just able to experience that much of what is there to experience and to open up. I'm still too small in my imaginative and intellectual power to be able to really take in what that means. Nothing can ever remove me from the living body of Earth, so we're already home. She continues, I feel such awe that at this very time that we're landing ourselves in such a pickle as humans on this planet, or as life on this planet, that there have been two great rivers in the human journey, spirituality and science. And in our early days, they were interwoven, but they've been hideously separated over the last centuries. And we've been torn apart by that. And now in our time, they're flowing together, and that promise is so huge. In every major religion, there's these voices, but it's coming so strong from the indigenous ones, saying that Earth is alive, and Earth is sacred, that follows because if the earth is all we have, then we're totally dependent on it, and that it is sacred to us. And it follows that we wake up in this time to the sacred that we're living in, within and nourished by, the sacred living body of earth and its intelligence, or his or her intelligence. And not only that, but I feel that in time, the dangers we face are creating a huge evolutionary pressure on us to wake up to our true nature. I feel a sense of hunger and thirst in people to be present. And there's no question in my mind that our presence in our world is the greatest gift that we can give. Curiosity is a beautiful path, and we can walk the path of how we listen and how we help each other to listen. Sometimes I see the path we're on as having a ditch on either side that we could fall into. And one is paralysis, just shut down in fear, and the other is panic or social hysteria and turn on each other. And learning to listen a little for either one calls you back. And in this interview, the magazine asks Joanna Macy about a book that they see sitting to her side. And she responds, yeah, and actually when I first encountered Rilke's poetry, back in the 1950s, very soon after I walked away from Christianity, I was in Germany. And my second child had just been born. And it was a snowy day, and I go into the bookstore near the university, and there's that book I was looking at. I picked it up and opened, and fell open the book to the second poem. Rilke, in his words, I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may never complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I circle around God, that primordial tower. I've been circling for thousands of years and I still don't know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song? Macy continues, I had thought that I had failed on my spiritual path. I thought my spiritual path was a linear one that would go like Pilgrim's Progress through various stages of learning to the heavenly city. But to live in widening circles, I said, I could do that. She says, we're so lucky to be alive right now, aren't we? At this moment where anything we've ever known how to love and everything we have ever learned, how to seek courage and connection that can serve. And now we will sing hymn number 18, What Wondrous Love, and you can rise and body your spirit. My second reading for you this morning is by the Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt. She is our new Unitarian Universalist Association president. She says, today's Unitarian Universalism asks us to re-engage the largest question of our living in the service of liberation. I want a Unitarian Universalism that troubles the waters of what we mean by freedom. I want a Unitarian Universalism that offers up its power and authority into the service of justice and embraces new learning and surprise as sacred offerings. This especially when our beloveds directly impacted by injustice over generations somehow still welcome us when we show up in the spirit of lamentation, regret, determination, and a deeply invested discipline of hopefulness that together we might survive. My hard-won hopefulness, as eco-womanist scholar the Reverend Dr. Melanie Harris would call it, is that many of you might want to build a Unitarian Universalism together that is humble, that demands little from those who've been made to sacrifice so much, and that prioritizes its commitments to faithful living, even when we don't quite know how to make our own way. That is the Unitarian Universalism that I believe in. Right now, I think Unitarian Universalism is on a journey from liberal to liberation. And I am orienting myself toward the day when those words have new and fully empowered meaning in this world. Yes, so liberation or collective liberation. This can take on different interpretations, including what I just read by Reverend Dr. Sophia Betancourt. So what are we liberating from? In Buddhism, we might say suffering. In Unitarian Universalism, we might say injustice. And as maybe a Unitarian Universalist Buddhist, we would say suffering and injustice. Theologically, there's the term liberation and technically collective liberation. But in some cases, one is equal to the other. I would like to start with the traditional view of liberation theology, just to give a quick background, which in modern times was defined by Dominican Father Gustavo Gutierrez. First, I'll refer to a common description of what that liberation theology is, before going into a little more detail of what collective liberation theology might be. Spiritual liberation suggests something beyond the material world, yet we live in the material world. We transcend in this life from moment to moment, from birth to death. So how do we transcend amidst the suffering of this world and the challenges of this world? Liberation theology is a Christian theological approach emphasizing the liberation of the oppressed. In certain contexts, its socioeconomic analysis is with concern for the poor and political liberation for oppressed peoples. And it also includes and addresses other forms of inequality, such as race or caste. In the mid-20th century, Gutierrez helped to define this version, or this new idea of liberation theology in Catholic America in the mid-1950s. As socioeconomic development pushed the peasant workers and farming populations into desperate poverty. In 1971, Gutierrez's seminal work on liberation theology was written and aptly titled A Theology of Liberation. In his years while in South America with economic unrest came political unrest, and the military dictators took over many governments in the name of national security. Christian, whether Catholic or Protestant, liberation theology is a social and political movement that attempts to interpret the actions with Jesus, always being concerned for those who are oppressed and marginalized. In Christian liberation theology, Jesus is the liberator and always is firmly on the side of the poor. Because of this preference for the poor, liberation theology often calls for the reorganization of social, governmental, and economic structures so that the poor are not merely taken care of, but brought into the fullness of equality, into the fullness of justice and human flourishing. And as we know, tragedies of oppression continue to this day, and we only have to look at current gun violence and the policies that support it, that continue to support the ongoing oppression of the oppressed and those historically marginalized, with our society and children being those who are continually pawns and marginalized and hurt in a kind of Crusadian Caesar-style formation of oppression that we find ourselves in. By not engaging in liberating the oppressed, it is argued that by default we are bystanders to the oppressors. As Desmond Tutu continually stated in his life, if you are neutral in the situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. He continues, if an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, that mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. In our current times, we also see our wealth gap that is a travesty worldwide. Some live in mansions and others die of starvation, and there is nothing spiritual or liberating about that paradigm. There is nothing spiritual or liberating about people living in gated communities while others face war on a daily basis. There is nothing spiritual or liberating about poverty for anyone in this life. So the question in liberation theology is, what are we liberating from? We don't need to start in the 20th century with gun violence to look at the lens of liberation theology or the 1950s of Gutierrez. The 20th century brought a title to the movement, but Judeo-Christian themes of liberation have been happening since the time when the Jewish people were liberated from Egypt. And then centuries later, Jesus helping to liberate the most oppressed in the Roman government era. For the Jewish people, liberation from Egypt is essential in remembering of that faith. This was not a celebration of an individual being liberated, but a whole people. As Christianity developed, a collective liberation from Roman rule was an essential focus. We can look at other examples of where in history where there was the oppressed and the oppressor. And Buddha believed in equality and justice in his time and engaged in dismantling the caste system to the best that he could. And Jesus questioned how the oppressed could be marginalized in his time. Both questioned the power structures that were in place at their time in history and the ramifications of that in living a spiritual life, whether individually or collectively. In terms of race liberation, the late Reverend Dr. James Cone took the theology of Gutierrez and looked at the systemic oppression of African Americans and blacks in the United States and beyond. Reverend Dr. James Cone is known as the founder of Black liberation theology within the Black church. Christian women's liberation can also be studied within this theological lens, as well as other identities who have historically been marginalized. There is in Buddhism as well the teachings of interconnectedness, which are essential. And you can't take apart one thing from another. a conglomerate of existence. And as our reading from Joanna Macy said, there's a bodhisattva, who is someone who dedicates their lives with compassion in order to save and help those who suffer. The suffering of others is intricately tied to suffering of each individual, hence a collective awareness of our interconnected states of existence, a contemplation on what collective liberation is. Even 19th century environmentalist John Muir is known for saying, when you try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. And Martin Luther King said from his letter from a Birmingham jail that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and that we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied to a single garment of destiny. And whatever affects one individually affects us all indirectly. So everything is interconnected. And if our spiritual values aren't reflected into this as a community, and wider societal values, our spirituality can become piecemeal, partial, and is not fully embodied in our actions and values that we hold in our faith. We can say that Buddha or Jesus or Desmond Tutu or Lila Watson or Joanna Macy or Martin Luther King were all believers in collective liberation. And again, so what are we liberating from? Individualism, materialism, our own private selfish actions? Can we be liberated while the earth dies, as Joanna Macy has us contemplate? We need to be co-creators in bringing compassion and liberation to our earth and each other. In his seminal book, God of the Oppressed, James Cone says, it is impossible to separate love from justice and reconciliation from liberation. In Unitarian Universalism, we have the Commission on Institutional Change that puts out periodic reports. And in its most recent report, called Widening the Circle of Concern, it states, a universalist theology of liberation in the present day centers our capacity to be sanctuaries of radical truth-telling and abundant compassion, so that the all-embracing love at the center of our tradition can serve to make us all more whole. In 2019, the late Unitarian Universalist leader Elandria Williams said, liberation theology is a framework and movement grounded in the social gospels that states the truth that true followers must work toward a just society, bring about social and political change, and align themselves with the working class and marginalized. As our communities, our world and our faith movement wrestles with, how do we truly side with love? How do our values and highest ideals show up in the streets, in our homes, and in our churches? How do we truly embody the transformative offerings and promise of that all our faith offers? Let us explore together how we live into a radical and audacious Unitarian Universalist liberation theology. Unquote. Liberation theology is a path to action in the idea of collective liberation. In Buddhism, there's that individual effort to seek out how to alleviate suffering so that we can engage in the broader world to alleviate suffering to others. And other world faiths that include our multi-faith approach in Unitarian Universalism is also considering, what do we mean by this phrase and words, collective liberation. Our world is getting smaller and smaller, and we can travel in ways we couldn't in prior decades and centuries, and our planet is being extracted at a rate never in existence in this universe before. As wild places get smaller and smaller, and more people are rushing to our beautiful diminishing wildlands. And as Unitarian Universalists, we have our principles that have us reflect on these theological dilemmas of our time. Our second principle is justice, equity, and compassion in all human relations. And our sixth principle is the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And with our current changing language of our proposed statement on interdependence, traditionally known as the seventh principle, that new wording is, we honor the interdependent web of all of existence. We covenant to cherish Earth and all beings by creating and nurturing relationships of care and respect. With humility and reverence, we acknowledge our place in the great web of life, and we work to repair harm in damaged relationships. So how do we live out our principles in our daily lives, if indeed they are principles we wish to consistently embody? For each of us, that's going to look a bit different. We have our social justice actions. We have our principles of compassion in everyone that we meet. We volunteer for important causes. We get out the vote. We caretake for others. Some way of leveling the playing field in a world of injustice, fear, and inequality. How do we make a life of celebration of mutuality and interdependence? A life that is not just based on transactions and extraction of human worth, but joined in a common destiny of spiritual worth, engaging in compassionate action as a community. I wonder if the concept of individual liberation is a dangling carrot that is tempting, but ultimately not satisfying. As we see endangered species going extinct, gun violence increasing in our communities, and other widespread sufferings of this world, we are living in a collective world. So when we, as Unitarian Universalists, demand equality, there is a cost. Our privileges that we often take for granted. How can I be liberated when the oppressed continue to be oppressed and I live with my privilege? We know that what oppression looks like. We know how to reach out with our hearts to something larger than ourselves. And I believe that is what we are called to always be doing with our lives. We have traditionally in this country been big on the idea of independence in living, independent country, independent individuals, but yet we are part of communities, whether family, friends, our working environments, this church, or living off the land of earth. We aren't independent, we are interdependent. In regards to interdependence or interrelatedness, Martin Luther King said, in a real sense, all life is interrelated. All humans are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And he says, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality.
Amen.
So we get to the existential predicament. Amidst oppressed societies and people, how can one be free when others aren't? We see our interconnected lives in increasing forms, whether physical science to quantum science, entanglement theories that see everything that is ultimately interconnected. Of Earth and climate change, of what happens in Tunisia has a ripple effect in climates elsewhere in the world. Justice matters, so when a community has injustices of poverty, the whole community experiences a sense of communal poverty. Even our own Unitarian Universalist bylaws, known as Article 2, state that our declaration of faith in purpose and principles is needs to be relooked at to see if it meets the world and its spiritual needs as a liberal faith today. And as Dr. Sophia Betancourt says, maybe we're going from liberal to liberation. Maybe the earth won't be saved in our lifetimes, but maybe there are also paths that we cannot imagine. We can imagine what love looks like, and we can imagine what that love looks like one step at a time. When we see separation, love is what binds us back into something more whole. What the world needs now is to expand outward with our compassion and love, beginning with each other as a template for larger communities of this world, a collective liberation, a promise that that is possible. This is where we are as a society in the liberal religious tradition. We acknowledge where harm has been done, engaging in compassion and equality in all our actions, believing that sins are not eternal, amends can always be done, actions that heal an interdependent world can be sought after, and pondering the fallacy of independence in a collective society, and the paradox that the only true independence we have is the interdependence with each other. May it be so, and amen. We will now sing our hymn, Will You Seek in Far Off Places, 356, and then we will also engage in another hymn after that. So I have a benediction for you. These words are from E. Joe McCullen. E. Joe McCullen says, stand with your siblings. Stand with liberation. Stand with the possibility that the world is not just how it is, but how we make it. May you all engage in the world of freedom and collective liberation with your energy, with your love, and with the spirit of justice that we all have. Amen. And now we will also sing I Wish I Knew How, hymn number, I believe it's 151, Stand in Body or Spirit.
Free.
us in some actions around the Eva's Memorial, and then we will gather in the fellowship.
Thank you. I just would like to say, first of all, I want to thank the members of the Sanctuary Committee. We've put in 6 months of work and have come up with these 2 proposals. The members of the committee are Rebecca Broom, Bill Fernandez, Kathy Larimer, and Cynthia Ramirez. Kathy and Cynthia, if y'all could come up just to be available to answer questions, if there are questions folks have that I don't know the answer to, that would be excellent. Very briefly, the 2 proposals are metal and wood, and the metal is more traditional. The wood was suggested to go along with Avis's environmentalism. The voting will begin online, Valentine has told me, at 12:15 today and run until 11:59 Tuesday evening, after which he'll let us know what's been decided. So, just very, very quickly. Yes, Jolie.
The metal one online showed a picture of Avis and a little blurb about her. Is that really what will be on the metal one, if that's the one that that will be on? Okay. Yes.
The language is the same no matter which choice is made.
Okay, on the wooden one, there was no language.
That's right. It's just an example showing you the style.
Oh, the language would be...
The language is going to be the same no matter which choice we make.
Okay.
Thank you for that question.
And the picture of her would be on the wooden one?
Yes, the picture and the language is going to be on both.
What it's going to look like.
I'm right about that though, right, Cynthia?
Yes.
Yeah.
The picture and the language would be on either the wooden
Either
one.
one. That's right. That's right.
That helps you make a decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jacqueline.
When I read it, maybe a few weeks ago, and maybe it changed since then, I thought there was a plexiglass option with metal letters. No?
No, there are going to be letters for over the door that'll say
Right.
Avis Sanctuary, and we'll have it over each of the 2 doors. And those, are.
So that's not what we're talking about right now? We're talking about...
There are 2 for both of them.
There are 2 proposals.
The one that, hers is going to have letters. The one that I proposed as a piece of wood that has, what do you call it?
It's engraved.
Cypress tree, and then it says Avis Sanctuary. So there are 2 options.
So the metal option would have the picture and a little bit about her, and then it would have individual letters that are, appear metal like that, and they would be over each door.
Okay, but if you did the wood one, what would you have over each door?
The same thing, Avis Sanctuary.
Wood panel, as a piece of slab of wood, burned into it. I did the cypress tree on each side, and it'll say Avis Sanctuary on both sides.
And then there'd be
And
a
that other
separate...
plaque.
And then there's a plaque made of wood
Okay.
that has the image of her and
Okay,
a little
so
bird.
it's really 2 parts to this.
Yes, top and then,
And the same thing with the metal, the letters and
Yes.
a separate plaque. Okay,
Yes.
that's good. That clarifies a lot. That was not clear to me on.
That's why we're having this meeting, is to clear up the confusion of anything.
two
Yeah.
different things, depends on which one.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, that's good.
Yeah, just to reiterate, no matter what choice is made, there will be a sign over each door on the outside saying Avis Sanctuary, and there will be a plaque of some sort, be it wood or metal, with the picture and the language.
Got it. Thank you.
And that should be right outside of this door
Yeah.
on the wall.
Okay.
Right,
Thank you.
absolutely. Any other questions?
Because we want people to know who Avis was if we have Avis
Right,
Sanctuary.
right.
So online, we'll get something from...
Yeah.
Let me know.
Yeah, the ballot's supposed to go out any minute now, and it will be online going out to the members to vote. Are y'all asking questions?
No, we were just, some of them didn't clarify, because I didn't get everything online yet.
Oh, it was right.
Oh,
Yeah, 12:15, it should be appearing for everybody.
Almost.
Okay. Anything else? Well, thank you all. I appreciate your questions, and I'm glad everything seems to now be clarified, and look forward to seeing how we vote. Let's go eat.